Hey guys, this is Brent with Western Equipment. Today, I'm going to be giving you a walk around of a 2019 John Deere 560M round baler and also a 2019 John Deere 460M round baler. So let's get started. Starting out, let's talk a little bit about model numbers. As you can see on this side, we have our 560M. On this side, we have our 460M. So let's start over here and talk about just what these numbers mean. Starting with the 4 on the 460, this is going to indicate bale width or bale chamber width. So if you look here at the front of the machine, from this side to that side is going to be that 4 foot, which indicates you will be able to make a 4 foot wide bale. Moving back on our next number, this 6, this indicates 6 feet, and that's 6 feet of diameter. So you can create a 6 foot or up to 72-inch diameter bale in this baler. Moving back from the 6, we have our 0. This is going to be our series indicator. So what I mean by that is prior to 2018, these balers were 469s or 569s, and prior to that, 468s or 568s. Now that we've gone up and moved and changed models and grown, we've gone into this 0 series. Now, after the series indicator, like on most newer John Deere equipment, we have a trim level indicator. So in a lot of newer John Deere equipment, you'll have E's, M's, and R series, all indicating different levels of trim, which also turn into those different features and such in the machines. So this model specifically is going to be an M, which means it's a mid-spec model. Now moving over to the 560M, all indicate exactly the same, except for the 5 here is different, which is going to indicate that this is a 5 foot bale chamber creating a 5 foot wide bale. Moving across, the 6 is going to indicate exactly as the 460M, meaning it'll make a 6 foot in diameter bale on the inside or up to 72 inches. This is also a 0 here on the series indicator, so these are both 2019, so they're in the same series of baler here. And then it's also an M on the trim level, so it's in the same mid-spec trim level as the 460M. So from here, guys, let's move to the front of the machines, talk a little bit about the drive lines and the tongues. For the sake of this video, we're mainly going to be spending our time on the 560M, but just keep in mind that the 460M is going to be identical other than the width of the bale chamber and the width of the pickup, which we'll talk about a little more in a second. So starting here at the front, we're going to talk a little bit about the tongue. Just notice how heavily made this tongue is. This C-channel tongue made in there for that extra strength. Moving up here, we have this nice cover for our slip clutch. Slip clutch underneath there is going to be your protection on the drive line for overpowering this baler. So if we were to be sending too much power or getting overloaded, this clutch would slip before doing any damage to your internal drive components. Also right here on top of this lid, we've got nice holders for our hydraulic and electrical connections to keep them up and out of the dirt. Moving down, we'll talk a little bit about this drive line. Now, this is going to be different than some other drive lines here. This is not going to be a tube-in-tube design or that square shaft drive line design. This is actually called a groove spline drive line. So this is going to have the same spline and groove system as you would see here. It'd be a little different, but as you would see here at your hookup to your PTO. So keep in mind, your drive shaft here was, if it were to slide out and you were to disconnect them, they would look similar to what you see here at your PTO hookup. So while I'm here, we'll talk a little bit about the hookups. On these balers, you have the option to either go 540 or either of the 2 sizes of 1000 RPM hookups. So what that means for you, for those of you that are not used to tractor terminology, we have 3 different sizes of hookup or 3 different sizes of PTO shafts on tractors. This is going to be an example of 1000 RPM. You have 2 different sizes of these, 1 3/8 in diameter or 1 3/4. Now, what makes it 1000 RPM is the small grooves and the extra amount of splines that you can see in that. If this were a 540, you would have 6 definite splines and it would be a little smaller shaft. So you have those 3 different sizes to make sure to be able to hook up to whatever tractor you need to put this on. Now, while we're talking about tractors, one thing that you need to keep in mind is the PTO horse that you're going to need to run these 2 different balers. So you would think smaller baler, smaller PTO horsepower, but in this instance, that's not the case. Either one of these balers, as they're sitting today with the Mega Wide Plus pickup, which we'll talk about more in a minute, either one of these balers with the Mega Wide Plus, you're going to need 85 PTO horses to run these machines. If these just had the standard pickups, you would be able to run them at 65 PTO horse. So keep in mind 85 for the Mega Wide Plus or 65 for the standard. Now moving down here, talk a little bit about the hitch. If you notice here on each side of the hitch, we have these 4 bolts. Now this is an adjustable height hitch. Why this needs to be adjustable? Well, we have different sizes of tractors, different drawbar heights, different tractors configured differently, and this baler needs to be able to sit level for that optimum pickup. So you do have the option of changing that hitch to fit your operation, to fit your tractor. Moving here to the actual jaw, you can see we have a wide jaw here to fit those many different sizes of drawbars. Gives you plenty of versatility to use it on those different tractors. And then you also have a pin locking system here to keep this pin from coming out while in use. As we all know, when we're going through those hay fields, they can be uneven, rough, very bumpy. So you do have that system to make sure and keep your baler attached to your tractor. So from here, guys, let's go down and look at the pickup. Down here, we're at the pickup here. We're right in the front of the baler where the hay would feed in. And this right here is what is called our pickup, if you're unfamiliar with the terminology. So first thing I want to point out is what we have here is a mega wide plus pickup. So what that means is this is actually wider than the bale chamber. So if you look back towards the back, you can see where our belts run there. And those belts run across there, 8 across, making that the 5-foot bale chamber. So you can see that. But as we come out here and we look towards the front of this pickup, you'll notice that it is actually wider where all these little teeth are here. These pickup teeth are actually run a lot wider than our bale chamber. So that is what makes this the mega wide plus pickup. And why that is wider and what that's made for is accommodating those larger windrows, or maybe those wind blown uneven windrows, to make sure that you're getting all your crop in that one pass. So some of the things that we'll point out about this windrow, or about this pickup, is right here. First, starting out with this baffle roll. What this does is this creates and pushes pressure down on that windrow to help feed that crop up in evenly to the pickup. Next thing, moving back, that you can see here, this is going to be our compression rack. This does kind of the opposite of what the baffle roll does, except instead of keeping it, the baffle roll keeps the crop down on the ground, and the compression rack here keeps the crop from going up too high into the feeding system. Keeps it right there on the pickup so it can feed it on back. Now, next that we have here is going to be the actual pickup assembly with all these teeth you can see here that I'm moving. These are going to be our mega tough teeth here. As you can see, they're square. On a standard pickup, a lot of times these are round. So these square teeth here for this mega wide plus pickup are a lot heavier duty, a lot stronger, meant for keeping that, staying strong instead of bending like some of our round teeth. Now, one thing I'd point out is all those are the same across until you get here out on the edges. And out on the edges, as you can see, we have a lot wider tooth there, and that's going to be our mega tough tooth there on the end, and that tooth is meant to help grab that extra crop here out on the edges to help feed it into the pickup. So from here, next thing we'll talk about on the pickup is on back, which is going to be our rotor. Now, the rotor is what feeds the material into the bale chamber, and as you can see, it has sort of a spiral pattern on it moving back, and what that does is that helps to feed the crop into the bale chamber evenly. If all of those teeth were lined up in a straight row, it would cause that crop to go in chunks and cause what we call a pulse into the bale chamber. So all of this here is what makes up our mega wide pickup. So from here, let's move over to the sides and look at our chains. So now over here on the left hand side of the baler, where our chain and drive systems are, I want to talk a little bit about some of the features on the outside that have changed from the 9 series to the 0 series. First thing here, and probably the most noticeable, is going to be how you open your doors. Before, on the 9 series, you had a metal latch somewhere up in here that you would raise up and then have to pull out on the door. With the new design, you have now here this twist knob that you can turn, and it should push your doors open to you, just making it more easy access. Still have the locking system here on the inner side of the door, so you can lock these open when you're working on them. A couple other things here on the outside that we're going to talk about. You do have your twine guides here, as this machine does do surface wrap or twine, then also your twine outlets right here. So as we move to the inside here, look a little bit at our chains and drive system. One thing we really like to point out here is that our balers use the Diamond brand chain, or the John Deere balers really like to incorporate that Diamond brand chain, as it's made in the USA. It's known for its high strength and durability, and these are also 80 chains, so a very heavy duty chain, very heavy duty, well-made sprockets, meant for that longevity. One of the things that's very interesting too about these chains, about this baler, is you can actually add an auto lube system for these chains, as we know that keeping our chains lubricated for those long hours of use is very important. that's something to look into that you can add on these balers. Another thing that you can add here on the inside, if we look here at these holes, you can actually add a grease bank system for all the different bearings and inner workings in this machine for your rollers. You can actually add these grease zerks on here, run those lines to those different bearings to keep things very well lubricated, so we're not having those issues in the field. So great add-on there that you can be put on. Next thing that we notice here, these are actually our twine boxes. So as you notice, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can run 4 boxes of twine here, and also 4 balls of twine rather in the 4 boxes, and 4 also on the other side. So you have plenty of twine here to keep you going for those long nights. Next thing that we point out here is this is a new machine. Some of the things it's going to come with, it does come of course with your operator manual, and it also comes with a hitch shield here. So how this works is you would take this pin, your 2 washers and your clip pin, and you would actually run this over your drawbar, pin it through on both sides here, and hang that system over the drawbar. And what this does is protect your hitch from that crop, or keeping that crop from coming up, causing a plug, causing an issue there on the windrow. So this riding on your drawbar will run over the top of that crop to keep for an even flow there. So that's a couple of things here that your machine is going to come with. Some of the things also maybe to point out in the inside here is your twine arms, just knowing where they are, where to run that twine through to your guides. You also notice we have these different little yellow arrows here, all indicate very vital grease points, and they're throughout this machine, as we know that balers are a very high maintenance machine requiring a lot of grease and a lot of lubrication. But also one thing to just notice is how open everything is. Easy to get to our hydraulic connections to check for leaks, easy to get to our sprockets to change, our springs, our different adjustments here. A very wide open system here on this left hand side of the baler. So from here, guys, let's move around to the rear. We'll talk a little bit about tires and a little bit about our different ways of packaging, including the net wrap and twine. So still here on the left-hand side of the machine, as we're working our way back, talk a little bit about our gauge wheels here on the pickup. As you can see, this is solid or semi-pneumatic gauge wheel. Has a very small core in the middle of it, air core. Doesn't require a valve stem, doesn't require air, so very low maintenance here. But these gauge wheels are a very crucial part to your pickup, as they're what's going to help keep you up and out of the dirt and up and out of that debris, which less dirt and less debris makes for a lot easier baling and a lot nicer bale. So to adjust these, you have your adjustment here that you can adjust up and down to your preference or to what works best for your operation. So moving back here, looking at our tires, what we have on this baler here is going to be our high flotation tires. It's the largest tire that we can put on these balers. We use these tires generally in our area, being as we have that rough terrain, bumpy situations, but there are 4 options in the 0 series of tires for these balers. So if you prefer that smaller tire, or that's what works for your operation, you do have those options. But you can also see, I'm about 5'10". I mean, this is a very large tire, has a lot of extra space for that very soft ride, making that for that smooth ride through the field. So as we're moving back here, we'll talk a little bit about some differences here on our net wrap box. As you can notice here, this is a black poly material. It's no longer metal. Now, a lot of people have problems with the poly material, but keep in mind the issue that John Deere was running into is customers were backing these up into things, damaging that box, and then having to replace a very high value metal box. So going to this plastic material, cheaper for the customer if there is damage, but also you can see it's got some flex to it, but it's also durable, so you're not going to damage that if you were to run it into something. Now, next thing here that we'll talk about in the net wrap box, most things over here are pretty well the same. Your loading system is going to be the same. Opening this up, putting your roll in, feeding it in, also having the same storage here that you had before up top. But one main difference is a very high maintenance part is going to be that net wrap brake. Now before, this was a small pad that hit there on that pulley to stop the net wrap, but now as you can see, you have a full banded brake, almost the whole length of the pulley there, just making for a lot more even stopping, a lot less wear, a lot less having to change that little pad. Even though not too big of a deal, just a tedious item, have a lot less of that now here with this chain wrap brake. Now, we talked about before, this is a dual purpose packaging system. What I mean by packaging is you have net wrap or twine. This baler can also be used for John Deere B-Wrap. That's a video that we'll do later on to show you about the John Deere B-Wrap, but it's another packaging system like the net wrap, so we'll show that in another video. So from this side, we're going to move over to the right hand side of the baler and show you the inner workings underneath that door. So over here now on the right hand side of the baler, we'll talk about some of the things on the outside and then get inside the door to talk about the inner workings there. Some of the things out here, of course, like we talked about on the other side, you do have that turn knob for opening on the door. Same thing as your other side, you do have your twine outlets here, your twine guides going on down to your twine arms. But as we look down here by our twine arms, one thing that you have here, this is going to be your twine wrapping guide. So once you start the twine wrapping process, this arm is going to move over and then slowly move across as it's wrapping across that bale. So one thing to keep in mind is if this indicator is not moving during your wrapping process, you are having an issue there and it's probably not wrapping that bale. So keep in mind this is important to watch during that wrap process. Next thing moving up here is we have our bale density gauge. Now what this is this is the gauge and the pressure that you're putting on that bale while it's being made, creating that dense core and creating the size and heaviness of that bale. Now as you notice, this is a gauge, so this can be adjusted. So underneath this cover here, you can adjust that here at this bale density valve here. So this can be turned by your hand to adjust the density of that bale. Now, a general rule of thumb for a lot of guys is to run this gauge at about the 2 o'clock position. It's making a dense, heavy bale, but not getting too tight. We have customers that run this all over the board here. Some people even running all the way into the red. Now, that's okay if you're wanting to make that really tight, dense bale, but some things to keep in mind is by going here and creating that extra pressure and making that more dense bale, you're going to run into some issues. You're going to run into things like pins on your belts coming loose because you're creating so much pressure. A lot of hardship on your bearings. You may actually cause enough compaction that you're causing some hot bales. So when you're putting those bales in the barn, you might have that issue of having those hot bales. So keep in mind, run this at your preference, but a good rule of thumb is that 2 o'clock position. I'm going to close this up here, and then while we're right here, talk a little bit about the belts and also our belt size indicator. So this is going to indicate the size of that bale in the chamber. This can be adjusted from your monitor that we'll show you about here in just a minute. And also right here, looking at our belts. Now these are the John Deere designed diamond tread belt, and as you can see, this diamond tread not only makes for a great surface for grabbing that product and making that good belt, but they also are a very tough, very solid belt. They're 7 inches wide. There's 8 of them across the front of a 5-foot baler and 6 of them across the front on a 4-foot baler. So plenty of surface here grabbing on. Also, if we look at the side here of the belt, you can see that it does have these inner workings here. These are going to be nylon cords that are wrapped in there, also polyester cords intertwined in those, and that just helps with the resistance to puncture and just helps in adding to the strength of that belt. Now these are also not an endless belt. These are going to be laced together, so you will have a set of laces and a pin that connects. Now those laces are going to look a little bit like these fingers interworking here, and then you'll have a pin that goes through, and that pin is actually notched to go with those laces, so once they create that pressure, they create that locking mechanism on that pin. So very good system, also very easy to service if you have those issues, whereas we know that if we have a never-ending belt, one that doesn't have laces, a lot of times those are hard to service on these balers when we have issues. So from there, we're going to move here onto the inside of the door here. And first thing we'll talk about a little bit is about that monitor, like we talked about before. The 560M and 460Ms and also the E-Series balers are going to come with the BaleTrack Pro monitor. So this is what you're going to have in the cab of your tractor to do all these different functions, your wrapping functions, all your different settings. It'll also display error codes and such, which they also send you a cheat sheet on the back of this monitor here for it to help you out with all those different functions, show you the different error codes here. Just a great little tidbit from Deere to help you in your baling process. Now, if we look here on the inside of this door, you'll notice it looks very similar to the other side. We have our hydraulic cylinders here. We also have our twine boxes here, again, holding those 4 balls of twine. We have our outlets here for if we added in that lube system or that greasing system, that grease bank, and then we also have our various drive chains. So on this side, instead of having our main drive chains like we had on the other, we do have our rotor drive chains here. Now this also has the slip clutch for your pickup. So this is going to also act as protection like we had talked about before on the slip clutch on the main drive line. This will do the same thing. If we get overloaded in that pickup, we have those rough, harsh conditions that hard to process hay, you may have this give. And if you do, if this does slip, or if your drive line slip clutch slips, it will show you in the cab on this monitor. So just keep in mind, in those tough conditions, you may have those issues, you know, and if this slips, just know that you do have an issue and you need to get out and go check those things out. So everything here, again, like we talked about on the other side, very open, very easy to get to. Your hydraulic connections, your different grease points here. We have our twine arms, of course, feeding to that twine outlet, and all those various things here with inside. Very easy to get to in service and maintenance. Very wide opening door in your lock system here. Now, some of the things that we didn't talk about while going over this baler were some of the attachments that can be added to this baler. So this baler is not only as you see it here, but you can add those various things for your different conditions. These being M series balers, they're not only for dry hay, but also for silage. So you may be working in that wet hay, those wetter conditions. We do have things like silage kits. You have different kits for corn stalks. So you have a corn stalk compression rack that, like we talked about before, will add more rods here and also be a thicker solid shaft here, adding that extra pressure. You'll also have things such as your auxiliary take-up roll, which would be a roll that goes across the top of the belts on the back, keeping them from flopping over on hilly conditions or in high winds. You also have things like the baler box light kit. So when you're baling hay late at night, you'll have that when you open it up to turn those lights on, adding into you know, that visibility when changing our net wrap rolls. So a lot of great features here on these balers, a lot of great attachments to help fit your operation. Now keep in mind, guys, we are talking about the 560 here, 5-foot wide baler, and the 460. And as we talked about, they mirror each other from side to side other than the width. Now, some of the questions that may have is, well, do I need a 5-foot baler or do I need a 4-foot baler? And generally, guys, it's preference, but some of the things to keep in mind if you're struggling about which one to get. One thing to keep in mind is the stability factor. So you're a foot wider here and a foot skinnier here. So if you're in those hilly conditions, maybe you're worried about that baler tipping over, or the stability while going through the field, just you can rest assured that with the 5-foot, you're a little wider, a little more stability, maybe a little less here. But on the other hand, maybe you have those tighter places you need to get into, a lot narrow areas, narrower roads, so maybe you need the 4-footer to get into those areas. Another thing that we need to consider is when we're hauling that hay, where are we moving it to? When we stack it on the trailer, do we want it to be flush with our 8-foot trailer, or do we want it to hang off over onto the sides, which is what you would get with the 5-foot baler? All things to consider when looking into making your purchase. I hope after watching this video, you've seen the things that you've needed to see to help you in that process. If you have any other questions, please leave them below. Please hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. And today, in this overview of a John Deere 560M, golly, it's 2019. On the outside here, some of the different styling changes come now, kid, to make sure you're fitting your operation. Golly, dude, I couldn't get that one on my tongue. Are you full? Yes, killing it.